Okay, so I did decide to review the Halloween movies. I put several polls out there. I asked the question here on YouTube. I posted on my Facebook page question whether I should review them, and then I also put a Twitter poll. And 80% of you said, yes, we want you to revisit the Halloween movies. And speaking of Halloween movies, finding them all in one place is an issue, it seems. I need to know, like Shudder, why is it that you have Halloween 1 and then you just have 4 and 5? That's really weird. No, now that I think about it, it might be because the movies might have changed, like different distribution companies, so they are not all under the same umbrella, so I'm guessing that's why they're in different places. But it'd be really cool if they were all in one place, but honestly, I should eventually invest in the whole box set. I did that with Nightmare on Elm Street, and I did that with Friday the 13th. I just don't have the Halloween box set. Probably because I really only rewatched the first 3. I've watched those repeatedly over the years. 4 and 5, not so much. And I don't remember if I saw The Curse of Michael Myers, the 6th one. I remember the one with Busta Rhymes, and I remember the one with LL Cool J, but I forget which one came first. Because I saw those in a movie theater, and then I never watched them again. So this is going to be an interesting week. Also, word to the wise, the copy that is on Shudder is not digitally remastered. It still has all the hits and the pops of old film, which actually didn't bother me. Come to think of it, it was kind of nostalgic because it was like if I had gone to see it at the drive-in or the movie theater when it first came out. I'm not going to go over this movie scene for scene. Instead, I'd rather dedicate this video to talking about what made this movie so special. Even though this movie's 40 years old, just on the off chance that there is someone younger viewing this video, I would never want to spoil that experience for them. And speaking to my younger viewers, hi, how are you? I really, really encourage you to watch the original Halloween 1978 at nighttime with the lights off and the sound turned all the way up. Well, not all the way up, because your neighbors might hear screaming and stabbing noises and call the police, but loud enough that it's impactful. I actually think about stuff like that because the neighborhood that I live in, my sister just recently said that it's similar to the neighborhood from Poltergeist, and how the houses are very similar to each other and that they're kind of close together. So one time I was watching a horror movie and I had it on surround sound, and there was a lot of screaming and gunshots. It might have been Don't Breathe. And I thought to myself, if somebody was walking by the house right now and they could hear the surround sound from outside, they might actually call the police by the way this movie sounds. I'm off on a tangent already. Let me get back to what I was about to talk about. The score is amazing. You know the score is iconic. I used to actually have the album version of the score. When I was in high school, I found the album at a tag sale, and I also bought a record player at the same tag sale so I could play the Halloween album. A lot of times this fact gets a little bit overlooked, and that's the fact that this was co-written by Deborah Hill. John Carpenter gets all the glory for this movie because he is the director, and he also did the iconic soundtrack to the movie. But this movie was co-written by Deborah Hill, and I feel like more people should acknowledge that. One of the coolest things about this movie is that the neighborhood in which it takes place looks like 1,000 different places in the 50 different states of America, and that makes it even creepier because it could be your neighborhood. This movie is credited with being very influential on the slasher genre, and it is. I don't want to take away from that, but I feel like it owes a debt not only to Psycho, because everyone always notes the obvious comparison to Psycho, especially because of the knife that Michael Myers uses and that Norman Bates' mother used. Not going to spoil that one either. But it also owes a debt to Dementia 13, and people do not speak about that movie enough. It came out the same year as Psycho, but a lot of the things that are now used and reused tropes in slasher movies were originated in Dementia 13, even down to the character that strips down into their underwear and goes swimming in a lake, down to point of view shots. There were point of view shots in Psycho, but there was a little bit longer point of view shots in Dementia 13. And when you watch Halloween, those point of view shots are even longer, which I would even say lingering. The shots linger because there are some voyeuristic aspects to some of the things that the Shape, aka Michael Myers, does. Like when he's walking around the neighborhood and you see him from his point of view looking in people's windows, it kind of lingers to give you that kind of voyeuristic, creepy feel. I could also add that Black Christmas did a few things before Halloween that Halloween gets a lot of credit for. And I think Black Christmas came out in 1973, if I'm not mistaken, and Halloween is 1978. So there's a lot of things that Halloween gets a lot of credit for that they were not the originator of. They just really expanded upon it. Not to undersell Halloween, because there were some things done with cinematography that revolutionized horror movie making. Just the variety of filmmaking techniques that were used in this Halloween movie. As I was watching, this is the first time I've watched it and actually sat and kind of took note of all the different things that I was seeing, aside from just enjoying it as a movie and enjoying the story, actually looking at how it's made. And the different things that I happened to notice were, I talked about the point of view shots already, the wide shots. There's these really gorgeous wide shots that you see of the neighborhood, and it really makes you feel like you're inside the picture. Still shots. There's still shots where the director really allows you to sit there and see what you're seeing. It doesn't show you and then flash to something else. That's always annoying to me in some movies. I feel like, let me see what you're trying to show me. A great example of this is when Laurie and her friend are walking from school and Michael Myers steps from behind the hedge, and the point of view is a still shot looking over Michael's shoulder of the girls walking down the street. The camera doesn't move. When the shot starts, it's of the girls walking down the street in the hedge, and then Michael Myers actually moves into frame, stepping from behind the hedges, and you just see him and you just hear him breathing and watching the girls, and it just lets you linger on that moment and for an uncomfortably long time. So that is very effective. This movie does a lot of what is known as the American shot, which is shooting the characters from the knee up. And I actually like that. You know, I've complained, if you've watched my videos before, I've complained about a lot of newer horror movies being too close up on actors, being like all up their noses, all so close to them I can count the pores in their faces. That is so unnecessary. Pull back. The use of shadows and silhouettes was done so well. A lot of times when you see Michael Myers, he was in shadow, and really in the script he's known as the Shape. He's described as the Shape, and they actually really emphasize that by showing him as a silhouette, by showing him as just this figure more so than a person. They also play a lot with focus. Not everything is in focus. Like one of the most iconic shots is when Laurie is sitting there and you see Michael Myers in the background and he's out of focus, and they never put him in focus because you're meant to kind of go from regarding Laurie to noticing what's happening in the background and fearing for her as she doesn't know what's happening in the background. I almost forgot to notice about shadows and Michael Myers coming out of the shadows. There's another iconic scene where Laurie is standing there and there's just darkness behind her, and then you see just a little teensy bit of the mask, then a little bit more, then a little bit more, till you fully see his face coming out of the darkness. That was, I mean, stuff like that it's just done so well. The cinematic elements of this movie were done so well that the director of Friday the 13th, is it Cunningham? What's his last name, I believe? Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. He said that he watched Halloween repeatedly and studied it before he made Friday the 13th because of a lot of those cinematic elements. The dialogue in this movie is very interesting. There's a scene where a graveyard attendant starts to tell Dr. Loomis this story, and the story is actually kind of interesting, and then Dr. Loomis cuts him off before he's able to finish. I really appreciate the fact that they took the time to put so much detail into this story that the graveyard attendant was telling, knowing that it's going to be cut off in the script. And it's realistic. Sometimes people get cut off in conversations. Sometimes people talk over each other. These things are more realistic to dialogue, and I feel like some newer horror movies don't do that. They make the dialogue less realistic because they don't have these things happen. Another great thing that this movie does is it defies expectation. It'll have a character do something that you think is going to lead to a scene ending one way, and then it completely circumvents that and has the scene end in a way that you didn't expect. And for those that have seen it, I'm talking about, we'll say, the laundry room scene. You think one thing's going to happen, but then it doesn't happen, and then something else happens. The musical cues are superbly well timed. There are times when there's no music at all, and they make really good use of silence, and then obviously other times that incredible score comes in. And there's a particular scene where you see the shape do something just before the musical cue comes in. And if this were a newer slasher pick, they would have timed it so that the musical cue comes in right at the same time as him doing that action, and it's not as jarring as when he does the action and then there's a musical cue, if you know what I mean. And for those who've seen the movie, I'm talking about the car scene. Now, with that said, this movie's not flawless. I mean, Laurie does do some stupid horror movie stuff, like use a weapon and then immediately discard it without knowing whether you're going to need that weapon again. I can't even say it's a trope, because this might have been one of the first movies that a character did that. It's a trope now because it's 40 years later and we've seen it over and over and over and over and over again. But then it probably wasn't a trope, I'm guessing. A funny thing that I noticed was that when Laurie's babysitting, the little girl is watching The Thing, and I thought that was so funny because a couple years later, John Carpenter ends up remaking The Thing. Well, he probably had designs on remaking it, which is why he had it in this movie. But I thought that was kind of a cute little thing that he put in there. And I really, really love how he ended the movie and the still shots of the different rooms in the house. I thought that's just amazing, and I think that's one of the reasons why this movie is so rewatchable. I mean, I can never say, oh, I'm tired of watching Halloween, because it really is something you could watch year after year and find just little things that you didn't notice before. Now I'm going to go watch part 2, and I'll be right back in a moment with my thoughts on that. What's really cool about part 2 is that it picks up right where part 1 leaves off. As a matter of fact, it actually re-shows the last scene from part 1 as it continues the story. And I wish more horror movies would do that with sequels. These sequels always want to try to be so different from each other and so, out of pocket, why not just continue the story where it left off? Since I started talking about the score in the first one, I'm going to talk about the score in this one as well at the beginning rather than at the end of my review. And it's interesting because this movie starts off with Mr. Sandman, which I think is a song from the 1950s. But it seems so out of place, but yet perfect for what's actually happening in the movie. And then the movie continues to go on to its original theme, the iconic score that John Carpenter did. John Carpenter came back and apparently remixed it, because if you notice, it's the same but different, if that makes any sense to you. It's like, was John Carpenter the first person to do a remix? I don't know, but he came back and remixed the same theme that he had. And like in the first one, the score is used very strategically. There's times when there's silence and that's used very effectively, and then there's times when a score is used and that's equally as effective. John Carpenter is a director. Wait, did he do part 2? Can't remember. This is a director that knows when to use silence. For part 2, the screenplay was written by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill again. But in this one, remember how in the last one I said that someone was watching the thing on television. In this one, someone's watching George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. And I really love the beginning of that movie for this one line. And I don't know why it's so funny to me. But when the guy's like, they're coming to get you, Barbara. And Barbara's like, you are so ignorant.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it. You're ignorant.
I don't know why. That always cracked me up when she called him ignorant. Of course, the point of view shots are back. The cinematography in these first two Halloweens is just gorgeous. I cannot say enough about it. I think it's the #1 thing that lifts these above other slasher movies is the way that they are shot. And dare I say that Steven Spielberg cribbed the lens flares off of John Carpenter, but Spielberg did give us the push-pull, so I guess we're a little even. Speaking of camera work, I don't know whether I mentioned in the first movie, because they did it in the first movie and they did it again in this one. I really liked the point of view shots that instead of it being directly from the Shape's point of view, the camera kind of hovers a little bit over his shoulder, as if you were walking with him. I also like how the focus has now moved from the teenage babysitters to the staff at the hospital. Because to me, people who work in hospitals are very interesting people. That's why there's so many shows about people who work in hospitals. But then I might have a bias because there's so many people in my family that work in hospitals. Both of my grandmothers were nurses at UConn Medical Center. One was a registered nurse and the other one was a nurse practitioner. My grandfather was a dietitian after he got out of the army, and my aunt was an x-ray technician. So I grew up surrounded by hospital people, and my grandmother used to have these Christmas parties, and the hospital staff used to come to her house for Christmas in shifts. Like when they would just have the party all night, because you know you have the nurses that work first shift, second shift, third shift, and the doctors and the orderlies and all these different types of people. And they were always very interesting people to me. Actually, I misspoke. This is in the movie, it's technically not a hospital, it's a clinic. Which leads me to one of my favorite scenes, the hot tub scene. Just the carnage that you can create with scalding hot water is amazing. The only thing that bothers me about that scene is when the nurse thinks that the hand over her shoulder is her boyfriend and she starts sucking his fingers and it's really Michael Myers. How could she not taste the dirt, blood, and the stench of death on this man's hands? I mean, this is so gross.
That's all. Now, bud, don't be that way.
This is a sequel that introduces into the story the fact that Laurie Strode is Michael Myers' sister. And while I felt like this was a very, very strong follow-up, it's still not quite as good as the first one for me, for a couple reasons. Number one, the Shape can walk through a glass door. Okay. Laurie Strode's wig. Hard to not focus on that. And the scene when he breaks through that cheap-ass balsa wood door towards the end of the movie. But then I could just be nitpicking, because once you see a movie like 25 times, you're going to start to find something that you don't care for in it. That said, this is still a really solid sequel. Funny little thing that I noticed after all these times rewatching it is the character that gets hit by the car. When they speak about him in this movie and they say his name, having watched the first one and the second one back to back, I just finally picked up on the fact that that was the guy that Laurie's friend had set her up to go to the dance with. And I don't know why. Well, you know why? Because I probably never sit there and watch these back to back like that. Even when AMC does their Halloween marathons, for some reason, whenever I turn on an AMC, they're always playing 4 or 5, and I'm not as interested in 4 and 5. So this is the first time I've sat down and watched 1 and 2 back to back. So maybe that's why I didn't pick up on this earlier. But like I said, solid sequel. I just prefer the first one to the second one if someone were to ask me, but still, both great movies. I'm going to go ahead and watch part 3, Season of the Witch, and I'm probably going to put that as a separate video because I feel like it deserves its own separate video. So let me know what you thought about Halloween, the original Halloween 1978 and Halloween 2. And also let me know, how old were you when you first saw either of the Halloween movies? Did you get to see them in the theater? Did you watch them on VHS? If you're younger and you just found these movies streaming, what's your reaction to these classic slasher movies? Let me know in the comments. Continuing on with the Dollathon, we are going into Dolly Dearest. And I just have to say, I feel so out of practice because it's been so long since I've been on camera, and I feel like I have to keep repeating myself, and I'm stumbling over my words because I'm not speaking enough. But bear with me. Let's talk about Dolly Dearest. I paired Dolly Dearest with Child's Play because in my mind they go together. They both have supernatural elements. Dolly Dearest reminds me of Chucky in a lot of ways, and now I know why, because as I was preparing for this video, I found out that the stunt actor Ed Gale played both characters. So there's that. In this movie, a family moves from LA to Mexico because the father intends to reopen a doll factory. Then an archaeologist that was digging around some Mayan ruins released an evil spirit, and the evil spirit takes residence in one of the dolls. Well, one of the dolls at first, and then we have Dolly Dearest. The family consists of the father who's reopening the toy factory, the mother who's played by the actress that played the mother on Pet Sematary before she was the chief of security in the original Star Trek Next Generation. She was the original chief of security before Worf was the chief of security, but then they killed her off. And I guess maybe she went back to acting or something. Back to acting. Star Trek is acting too. why am I in my mind? I thought Star Trek was real. No, those are actors too. She didn't go back to acting. She was acting on Star Trek, and she probably went for other roles, and that's probably why they killed off her character, and then Worf became the chief security on Enterprise. Sorry for that Trekkie moment. I grew up in a Trekkie household. My mother is a Trekkie, reads books, took me to my first convention. That's my mother's stuff. Shout out to my mother, and live long and prosper. Oh yeah, I was talking about what the family consists of. I talked about the parents, didn't mention the children. There is a daughter who reminds me of Drew Barrymore, and I'm just going to call her Great Value Drew Barrymore. And their son reminds me of a miniature Herbert West. They also have a domestic worker who I think is played by the same actress that played the woman that killed Selena. So unfortunately for that actress, I have a very negative association with her because you kill Selena. This movie gets a little bit unfairly painted as a Child's Play knockoff. While it did capitalize off of the success of Child's Play, I think it's different enough to be its own thing. It's not nearly as good as Child's Play. It has a lot of problems. It feels too long, and the story dragged on for me, which was interesting because I found out that it's only, 5 minutes longer than Child's Play. I actually made a note of it. Child's Play, this movie is 93 minutes long, and Child's Play is 87 minutes long. So it's a difference of 6 minutes, but it felt so much longer. The technical aspects of this movie are fine. Cinematography, lighting, I said cinematography. I was about to say cinematography and camera work, but it's kind of like the same thing. The score was fine. The sound was fine. The acting was alright. It's just the writing that was kind of bad. One of the things in the writing that bugged me is the characters were always tripping and falling. I mean, excessively. The children's characters were written in the most annoying way. You don't even want to root for these kids because they're so annoying. Like I said, I blame writing for both of these issues. Oh, I better hurry up. I think there is a thunderstorm coming, and I want to get at least 2 more videos done before the sound gets even worse. Okay, where was I? Was I talking about the doll design? I'm gonna just start talking about that now. Then, I like the doll design. It did have some facial articulation. I would say a little bit less than what there was in Child's Play, but still pretty good. And in the movie, there was multiple Dolly Dearest wreaking havoc in the factory. And I thought that was very interesting because they kind of went back to that concept in Cult of Chucky, which I will be reviewing. But yeah, it just made me think of that. Then when I was preparing for this video, I found out that Don Mancini wanted there to be multiple Chuckies in Child's Play 3, but he was unable to do that at that time, but was able to do it in the Cult of Chucky, so that's why that happened. I don't know which one happened first. Let me see here. I wrote in my notes. I'm just going to read it verbatim. This is like Evil Doll horror movie Inception. Child's Play ended up copying a movie that copied it. But then I found out they're both released in 1991, so who did it first, or whose idea might have been first? When I say they were both released in 1991, Dolly Dearest and Child's Play 3 were both released in 1991. Child's Play 3 was released August 30th in 1991. Dolly Dearest was released August 18th in October 18th in 1991. So I take everything I just said back about Dolly Dearest and Child's Play and Inception and all that. Let me just finish this up because my battery's about to die. Crap. There's a reason why I haven't watched this movie in a very long time. It's just not very rewatchable for me. I watched it just for the purpose of doing a doll-a-thon, but Dolly Dearest is not one of my favorite doll movies. So there's that. It's not all that entertaining. What else did I write? Some people might have some nostalgia for this movie, so let me know if you're one of those people and tell me why. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I just like to hear other people's opinions. Oh, and that's all I wrote. So, what do you think about Dolly Dearest? How old were you when you saw Dolly Dearest? Does it have a nostalgic factor for you? Let me know in the comments. If I entertained you, made you smile, or helped you pass the time, please consider supporting this channel so that I can do that more. Horror channels often get suppressed and demonetized, but you can help in 3 ways: by pledging a monthly contribution on Patreon, sending a one-time tip using your preferred financial app, or you could help for free by liking and commenting for the algorithm, and most importantly, sharing this video on your social media. Thank you so much. Welcome back. Let's get into Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. This takes place partially at a youth shelter. Maybe they were trying to recapture some of the spirit of A Nightmare on Elm Street 3: The Dream Warriors. While this still includes trashy-ass parents, they do introduce some other characters, like Maggie, who works as a counselor at the shelter, and Doc, played by Yaphet Kotto, is the psychiatrist at the shelter. His wig, though? Oh, hell no! The first 27-year-old teenager that we are introduced to pops up in Springwood with amnesia. He is brought to the youth shelter. The other almost 30-year-old teenagers are Tracy, a tough girl with a sexually abusive father, Carlos, a smiley kid with a physically abusive mother, and Spencer, a rich kid with an emotionally abusive father. He's the only one who could actually pass for an actual teenager. He's played by Breckin Meyer, who we also saw in The Craft. Roseanne and Tom Arnold make an appearance at a weird town fair where the teens notice there are no children. Freddy tortures each one of them by taunting them with their previous traumas. With Carlos, it's his abusive mother and using his hearing impairment against him. With Spencer, it's his abusive father, his love of video games, and his weed usage, which they totally overplay and make it seem like weed is just like taking LSD. It is not. With Tracy, it's her traumatic abuse at the hands of her father. The kills are done in such a cartoonish way. Even the score is very cartoonish. And if I was 5 years old when this movie came out, this would be my favorite horror movie. I should ask those of you watching this, were any of you little children when you first saw Freddy's Dead, and what did you think of it? Did you like it? Because it was very childish to me. There's a Johnny Depp cameo in this, which was kind of fun. And I heard that he was a little bit disappointed that he was not asked to do a cameo in the Freddy vs. Jason. This is the movie that really confirms that Freddy is a dream demon, as he is possessed by 3 small dream demons. So I guess he's a person who's possessed by a dream demon. But either way, he is a supernatural entity. I find that bit of lore interesting, as well as some of the backstory about his childhood and the fact that they gave him a child. Freddy's makeup doesn't look horrible in this, but it does look too dry. Smack some KY jelly on that mug and it would have worked. Except for those ears. What's up with that? This features another rap song during a scene where Tracy is hitting a heavy bag, and it's Chubb Rock's Treat Me Right, which I found kind of funny. That particular song was not made specifically for this movie. It was just a rap song that came out either in 89 or 90, and I used to always hear it at the Round and Roll skating rink. The last 10 minutes or so are in 3D. For this review, I watched the 2D version that's available on HBO Max, but I did get to see this in the movie theater when it first came out in 3D. This one I saw with my friend from school, my middle sister, and my dad. He tried to buy the tickets and dip, but then the box office attendant said they can't go into an R-rated movie by themselves because none of them are 17 years old. So my poor dad had to sit through Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare, even though he doesn't like any of these movies. He doesn't like slasher movies at all. Thanks, Dad, for taking one for the team. For that reason alone, I have nostalgia for this movie, despite how not so great it is. It's still better than Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday. I told a story about getting to see Jason Goes to Hell in the movie theater in one of my tag videos. I'll put it at the end of this video. But that was the second slasher movie that I got to see in a movie theater. Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare was the first slasher movie I got to see in a movie theater, and then Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday was the second one I got to see in a movie theater. All of the other 80s slasher movies that I've seen, I always saw them on video or on HBO or something. At the time of this recording, I was able to watch these on HBO Max, but I think they might also be available on Peacock TV. Hey Latchkey kids and driving mutants, let's go back. Way back. Back in the time. I had to put on my best 1990s outfit to talk about Fear Street 1994. This is going to be an interesting review because I have conscious memory of the 90s. So much so, I was in high school in the 90s. Speaking of 90s, let's talk about the thing that stands out the most in this movie, and that is the soundtrack. It was actually a pretty good soundtrack. I just wish they played more than 15 seconds of a song. It's like they were trying to squeeze so many songs in that they cut them off way too early. Also, some of the songs weren't even from 1994. Like, immediately when I heard Firestarter from Prodigy, I was like, that wasn't even out yet. That didn't come out till 96. I'm just gonna jump around a little bit. I thought the fight at the vigil was very realistic. There were free-for-all fights like that in the 90s a lot, especially in my high school. It starts with one person hitting another person, then you hear, oh, get off my cousin. Then you hear, get off my cousin. And then next thing you know, it's like 16 people fighting. Also, the bus scene, I saw a lot of comments on Twitter from younger people about opening the back of the bus. And apparently, I guess in newer buses, there's alarms. But back then, at least late 80s, early 90s, I never heard any alarms on the bus. They used to open the back of the bus all the time. I hesitate to tell this story because I don't want to give the babies any ideas. But back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was very frequently that the back door of the bus was open. At least in the small town where I came from, kids used to jump out of the back of the bus just for fun. Like, it would get to the bus stop and they just thought it was funny, instead of going to the front door to just open the back door and jump out the back. The worst I ever saw is when they were doing fireballs out of the back of the bus with a lighter and hairspray. Now that was crazy. Also, not snitching to the cops was just how it was. I counted so many homages to older horror movies. On my list, I wrote down Friday the 13th, the killer in the woods, Scream, because the first kill scene, the costume kind of reminds you of Ghostface, and Nightmare on Elm Street because they made booby traps, Halloween, the scene where the babysitters are talking to each other. Well, actually, one of the girls is babysitting, the other one's not babysitting, but they're talking to each other over the phone, and it kind of reminded me of Halloween. Hellraiser, the way one of the entities reanimated from the floor, reminded me of when Uncle Frank came back. Obviously, The Shining, with the axe scene through the door. Flatliners, which is a 90s classic to me, with them trying to kill someone and then revive them. Intruder, which is a underrated slasher flick that takes place in a grocery store. And one of the kills they did also reminded me of a kill from Intruder. The Omen, from the music cue at the end of the movie. And The Exorcist, because there is somewhat a possession. This movie's not without its faults. I don't think that it is amazing, but I think it's fun, especially being that it's on Netflix. I do wonder how the younger generation will take it, especially if they don't know what movies this movie is referencing. I do think the fashion could have been a little bit more diverse. Everything wasn't just the grunge look. We had lots of different looks in the 90s, like the funky polka dots that I'm rocking right now. But costume design aside, it felt fairly 90s-ish. Oh, there was another comment someone made. They asked about why would the phone cord be that long? Because it's a corded phone in the kitchen. Yeah, some of the cords were super long so that you could walk around the house with them. This is before a lot of people had cordless phones. All in all, I thought Fear Street 1994 was pretty fun. It had a variety of kills, which I enjoyed. The gore was alright, especially considering that they kind of mixed practical effects with CGI. The CGI did not look too bad. And I'm intrigued by the fact that this is going to be a 3-part series. So I'll be back in a moment to talk to you about Fear Street 1978. Welcome back, and let's talk about Fear Street Part 2, 1978. Well, it's supposed to be 1978, but everyone's shorts are too loose and all the hair is wrong. It doesn't look like 1978 at all. When I googled the writers, I noted that they were born in 1980 and 1983, so that probably explains that. They are clearly paying homage to Friday the 13th, but they didn't check the date. The Friday the 13th series are 80s movies, not 70s movies. All of the other movies that this one references that I picked up on were also 80s movies. Anyway, we're going to ignore that it's supposed to be in 1978 and just pretend like it's 1984, because that's what it feels like. At first, I was a little bit uncomfortable about these two characters having a love scene together because this dude looks hella old and she looks super young. And then I Googled them and turns out he was only 17 during the filming of this and she was 19. Still a little uncomfortable knowing that he was underage, but he still looks hella old. Like, what? Moisturize. Also, I have a hard time believing that anyone that was that into punk music that early when it was still underground would even attend summer camp, much less work at one. So suffice to say, I didn't love the character so much in part 2. I do like the backstory about the witch. I found that very intriguing. I thought that the location looked great. Like, you really felt like you were at a summer camp. For anyone that's worked at a summer camp, did you really have to clean like outhouses? Or that just seems really, really gross. I couldn't be me. There's some decent kills in this, but I didn't like them as much as the kills in 1994. I was a little bit disappointed that they still didn't explain a couple of the other entities yet. Speaking of age, I forgot to mention that this character from Fear Street 1994 is actually almost 30 years old, but she passes for a teenager so easily. If I have to say which Fear Street I liked better, I'm going to go with 1994 better than 1978. I did check out the trailer for the next installment, which takes place in 1666, and I'll be watching that later tonight, so hopefully I'll have a review for it tomorrow. So to recap, I thought Fear Street 1994 was alright. It was a lot of fun, had a 90s feel. Fear Street Part 2, 1978, not so much. While I wasn't exactly bored by it, I just didn't think that it was as good as the first Fear Street. I am looking forward to Fear Street Part 3 because I like that type of lore, especially witch folklore. Check out my review for The Witch and Eyes of Fire because this is giving me that type of feel and I like those type of period piece horror movies. But like I always say, just because I love something doesn't mean you won't hate it. And just because I hate something doesn't mean you won't love it. Have you seen Fear Street Part 1, 1994 or Fear Street Part 2, 1978? What did you think of them? Put it in the comments. Also, are you looking forward to Fear Street 1666? Until next time, bye. Special thank you to my patrons. If you are new here, welcome to my channel. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Reminder to new and returning Latchkey kids, don't forget to follow me on your preferred social media platform and check the community tab on YouTube for some fun extras. By the way, here are some other videos you might like.